is India anywhere near its goal of becoming a Vishwaguru? The question also is if India's influence in the world is growing. More than two-thirds of Indians tend to believe this. But globally, among 19 major countries that have been surveyed in this Pew survey, only 28% people believe that India's influence is getting stronger. On the other hand, India's popularity in countries like France, like Germany, like Spain, that has dipped substantially in the last 15 years. And unsurprisingly, 57% Indians hold a favorable view of Russia, while the average percentage in 22 countries is only 14%. These are some of the findings of the latest survey by Pew Research Center. Let's get perspective on this in a moment. We will be joined, and of course, Leela Ponappa is already with us, former career diplomat and former deputy national security advisor. Also, Manoj Joshi is with us, distinguished fellow at ORF. Great to have you both with us tonight. Let me begin by asking you, Mr. Joshi, as far as India's standing in the world is concerned, the influence that it wields among the global community, as far as this research shows, there hasn't been a dramatic shift, but Indians tend to believe that we do have a shift. If you can explain this to us.
Well, as you know, that the same survey also points out that in India, men are more likely than women to believe India is getting stronger. My own view is that this has to do with a kind of a muscular image that the present government is undertaking and is putting forward into the world, that India is a tough country, that India is doing well, etc. So there's a kind of a self-image which is emerging here. And this plays then into the poll. So you find there's a discrepancy in the poll, that is that the Indians believe we are doing better, but the others, people in other countries don't quite believe so. So there is obviously, I would say, a certain element of national delusion, if I may use that very strong word, that people have a delusion. They take, and that is also because of the fact that the government of the day is very skilled in projecting narratives. A lot of publicity is the order of the day. A lot of dramatic events and other activities which tend to give the average Indian and sort of somewhat an exaggerated notion of what India has achieved.
Significantly, there is a dip in Europe as far as India's popularity is concerned, and we're talking specifically about countries like France, Germany and Spain. That is revealed in this survey. Leela Ponappa, can you explain that?
Well, you know, I haven't had the benefit of seeing the survey since this request from your channel came a short while ago.
Yes.
But I think one has to be a little realistic, and I believe Manoj has very clearly put down the reasons for this kind of mismatch. In any such opinion survey, there are the facts and there are the impressions. And for all you people in the communication business, as you know, quite often the impression can overtake the fact. And depending on on how the survey has been structured, the kind of questions are asked. This brilliant piece in Westminster several years ago, which showed how you can get any kind of response to a survey, depending on how you ask the question. Now, but coming back to your specific point.
About Europe.
You know, Europe itself, I think, has certain contradictions within its perceptions of itself and of other countries. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be very preachy, sometimes it can be very understanding, and so on.
Right.
So, without going into the details of how this survey was conducted, what the sample size was, and so on,
yes,
it's really very difficult to say, well, you know, there was X percentage change in France, because I think impressions and opinions cannot be quantified in this manner.
Fair enough.
Who were these people? What was the level of where in society did they stand? What was their economic activity?
Yes.
You know, a businessman, for example, a Rafale executive might have a totally different impression
Yes.
of India from, let us say, a student at Sorbonne
Right.
who is looking at the handling of social equity,
Correct.
right?
Right.
So the impressions can be very different.
Fair enough.
Net, I mean, if we're talking about how the image of India gets projected or understood,
Yes.
say, in Europe,
Yes.
obviously so much of it depends on the media.
Correct.
And the media, as you know, can be selective. It can cover the full range. And if you contrast that with our own impression of ourselves, as I said, Manoj, I think, has put it with great clarity.
Yes.
We might have certain notions. Again, within India, there was the difference between the perceptions of the men and the women. And I think if you go into different categories of society,
Yes.
you will get different impressions as well.
Yes.
So I wouldn't take these things too literally in terms of the quantification, but I think it is an interesting, in a large sense, it is an interesting differentiation
Yes.
in terms of the self-image and the external.
Right. So between notion and what is actually the reality by way of India's policy push when it comes to foreign policy, Mr. Joshi, we are at the penultimate end of the G20 presidency that India has spoken about at length in terms of its Make in India push as well, in terms of its ability to forge free trade agreements between India and various countries around the world. How has that actually shaped up? Because there is a perception and there is the reality as well. If you can bridge that gap for us.
You see, I must also point out to you that Mexicans and Brazilians are also critical of the government's leadership. It's not just the Europeans, according to the poll. Now, as far as what you're talking about, see, the point is a lot of the publicity, a lot of the hype, Make in India, whether it's G20, whether it's anything else, is taking place in India. So if you are living abroad, I'm saying you look at the G20 as the G20. I'm saying in India, we have looked on it as some kind of a tamasha or a dramatic event, which almost every part of India, any city of India you go to, you will find some G20 stuff. But that's way beyond what the G20's purpose is, and way beyond what G20 is actually doing. You see, so there is an image of G20 which has been conjured up in India. You see, and what you are now seeing is a reflection of that amongst the average Indian. Now,
Right.
whether the problem is that those guys are not the same thing doesn't happen abroad. If you're abroad, you look at the reality of your Indian contact. As Dr. Ponappa said, it is true that a Rafale executive looks at India the different way from an ordinary Frenchman. But I'm presuming that any decent poll covers up these differences.
Right.
It takes care of these biases. Meaning, polling is a scientific process.
Yes.
It's not that you simply go and catch some guy and ask him his opinion. Mm-hmm. So I'm presuming that Pew has done a scientific poll.
Right.
And I'm going by it because polls are useful. No one would argue that polls are the truth, but people would argue that polls are a useful guide towards shaping policy, towards situational awareness as to where you are, what you are,
Yes.
how you are,
Yes.
and moving ahead.
But on the point that Leela Ponappa was making as well, and coming to you for that, ma'am, as far as projection of an image is concerned, it is vital to be able to draw in the kind of investments that a country needs to grow. For that ability of India, and having done that in the recent past, and the outcome of this survey that has come about, how do you think we've done? Oh, we seem to have lost connection with Leela Ponappa. Can I take that question to you, Manoj Joshi?
Can you just repeat the key point?
You know, I'm talking about the projection, this image that Leela Ponappa was talking about, that there is an attempt to create an image. And for a
Yeah.
power like India, even a soft power image is an important tool to be able to draw in the kind of investments that you require for a developing economy. Have we done that well?
We've done reasonably well, but we've also expended a huge amount of money for it. Meaning, all this, narratives. The government, as I told you, is very skilled at generating narratives, and they have done a lot of public diplomacy abroad. All that has been done. But I also need to point out one other thing to you, that the other country which we are seen as a rival, which is China, what has happened is that in this period, China's image has declined somewhat dramatically.
Yes.
Many of these countries, and I'm sure if you look at the poll Pew figures, you'll find that we are also benefiting from the fact that currently China is in the doghouse as far as the international community is concerned.
Right. Indeed, it has happened, and perhaps some would say that what China is losing out on, India should find favor with in terms of the international community and our standing as a beacon of growth in a world where we are seeing slowing economic growth. But of course, this is the result of a survey. There are several questions to be asked, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. Leela Ponappa, we've lost connection with, but we thank her for joining us along with Manoj Joshi on this discussion. Many thanks. We've run out of time on this edition of India Tonight, but of course, we will be back same time tomorrow. Meanwhile, do look up at the skies because it's that once in a blue moon kind of scenario. And moon is going to look lovely tonight is what we hear. For the moment, from me and the entire team, have a great evening ahead. Bye-bye.